Welcome to Inside Insights, your quick hit of tips, tools, and trends for manufacturing, distribution, and Dynamics 365 Business Central, brought to you by InsightWorks.
Picture this. You shut down receiving, you walk over, and you literally lock the heavy warehouse doors.
Yeah, the actual physical door.
Right, exactly. And for the next 2 days, your entire team is just running around counting absolutely everything in the building.
Every single item.
I mean, we're talking everything from raw material sitting on pallets to, half-finished production orders on the floor. Exhausting, certainly. But then when it's all finally over, the numbers just don't reconcile.
Oh, they never do. That's the classic nightmare.
It is. Accounting is tapping their watches, demanding the final numbers for the quarter. And then, well, the absolute worst-case scenario materializes. Someone finds a massive pile of uncounted items hidden behind a rack in the back corner.
That is just, it's the worst feeling in the world.
It really is. Because the whole grueling process essentially has to restart. Welcome to the deep dive. Our source material today tackles this exact nightmare.
It's a high-stress, high-stakes scenario. And unfortunately, for a lot of distribution centers and manufacturing floors, it's not some rare glitch. It is a predictable, recurring reality of their operational cycle.
We are looking at an excerpt today titled Optimizing Inventory Counting in Dynamics 365 Business Central. And it focuses on a specific app called Advanced Inventory Count by InsightWorks.
Right.
Our mission today is to figure out why standard warehouse counting systems break down so easily in the first place, and how, rethinking the software architecture can turn a terrifying 4-day shutdown into a streamlined single-day process.
Because the friction in these systems, it goes far beyond just annoyed employees. It fundamentally alters how efficiently a business can operate.
Exactly. And whether you are managing a massive distribution center yourself, or maybe advising clients as a software partner, or you're just insanely curious about the hidden bottlenecks in global supply chains, understanding the mechanics of data entry friction will completely change how you view operational efficiency. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the core problem. Dynamics 365 Business Central's native tools.
Yeah, the native tools.
What is structurally happening in the software to cause these meltdowns?
Well, to understand the breakdown, we really have to look at the original design intent. Business Central's built-in counting tool, which is the physical inventory journal, was conceptualized for very, very straightforward environments.
Like a mom-and-pop shop.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Think of a single stockroom where one person walks down one aisle with a clipboard, takes an hour to count everything, and just types it into a computer. Mechanically, it generates a list of items, lets you fill in the quantities you've counted, and then posts the adjustments to the ledger.
Which, that seems perfectly logical until you try to scale it. I was reading through the source material, and native limitation makes me think of trying to count inventory at a massive car dealership.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Imagine the native software doesn't let you count, say, Honda Civics in the front lot, and then separately count Honda Civics in the repair bay.
Right, because of the location lock?
Exactly. The system's rule is that you can only input a specific item once per location. The moment you enter 10 Civics in the front lot, the system essentially locks that item. So the worker in the repair bay tries to enter their 2 Civics, and they just get an error.
That analogy captures the structural wall perfectly. Unless a business has specific advanced bins enabled and rigorously maintained, an item can only be counted once per location. So what happens in your dealership scenario? The software won't do the math for them, so the human workers have to bridge the gap.
They have to physically track each other down.
They do. What's fascinating here is how the software's architectural limitation actively forces teams to revert to manual, analog workarounds.
Right.
You end up with warehouse workers walking around with clipboards tracking subtotals on paper. They find 3 units in aisle A, 12 in aisle D, and 5 on the loading dock.
And they're doing this on the fly.
Yes. They have to physically add those up on a calculator or in their heads just to enter a single consolidated figure of 20 into the system. This manual math is the exact injection point for human error.
It seems like you're setting a trap for your own team. It is incredibly easy to drop a zero, misread someone's rushed handwriting, or just forget to add that final stack of 5 from the dock.
Totally, and Microsoft is transparent about this. Their own documentation on counting and adjusting inventory in Business Central explicitly acknowledges this constraint. These aren't just minor bugs, they are structural walls.
Wow.
Furthermore, the native document-based approach still requires entirely separate reconciliation steps for warehouse entries, so you are fighting multiple rigid data structures at once.
I imagine this gets exponentially more difficult when you introduce lot numbers and serial numbers into the mix. You aren't just counting 20 laptops, you're tracking 20 unique alphanumeric barcodes.
Significantly more difficult. Business Central does offer a physical inventory order capability that adds some lot and serial tracking during counts. However, the source describes this native capability as, well, fragile.
Yikes. I would not want to hear my enterprise data architecture described as fragile.
It's a terrifying word in this context,
Wait.
but it's accurate because a single misconfigured line, a missing tracking entry, or finding an item in an unexpected bin, it can break the entire reconciliation process.
Just crash it.
The system just halts. It absolutely refuses to process the journal until a human manually untangles the discrepancy.
So if the native tools are practically begging for human error by forcing manual addition and halting at the slightest tracking mismatch, I want to look at the actual fallout.
The real-world impact.
Right. Beyond just having a frustrated warehouse manager working late on a Saturday, what is the measurable business impact of getting this wrong?
It creates a massive ripple effect that hits the bottom line hard. The source material brings in research published in the journal Production that specifically analyzed inventory record inaccuracy in distribution centers.
Okay.
They looked closely at how physical reality mismatched digital records, and they found that these inaccuracies actively destroy picking productivity.
Oh, because a worker's walking all the way to a specific shelf to grab an item that the system promises there, but the shelf is empty. That's phantom inventory.
Exactly. The worker wastes time walking there, searching around, and then reporting the error. But the study also highlighted the opposite problem, invisible inventory.
Invisible inventory.
Yeah, the system thinks you are completely out of stock, so it turns away paying customers on your website. Meanwhile, you have a whole pallet of that exact product sitting in a corner, gathering dust. The research proved this ruins warehouse capacity utilization. You end up with dead space and blocked aisles because the system doesn't know where anything actually is.
The intuitive counter-argument from a warehouse manager might be, well, we don't rely entirely on massive annual counts. We just do cycle counts, meaning they count a small subsection of the warehouse every week to catch those errors before they snowball.
Right, that is the standard industry defense. But the researchers in the Production journal specifically tested that methodology.
Yeah.
They found that simply implementing cycle counts is often insufficient to resolve the underlying problem if your initial baseline count is flawed.
That makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah.
If your foundational data is built on manual math errors, your cycle counts are just chasing ghosts. You're trying to calibrate an instrument that is fundamentally broken.
Getting the initial count right matters immensely. The challenge is that Business Central's native tools make getting it right the first time incredibly difficult, especially when you have like 20 people out on the floor counting simultaneously and needing to enter their data independently.
Which brings us to the solution highlighted in the source. Advanced Inventory Count from InsightWorks. It's an application available on the Microsoft Marketplace. But let's look at this skeptically for a second.
Okay, lay it on me.
If native Business Central is so structurally rigid that it forces manual math, fixing something this foundational sounds like it would require massive custom development. It sounds like a project that takes 6 months and disrupts every existing workflow in the building.
That is the usual assumption with enterprise software. But the architecture of this specific application actively avoids that trap. The source notes that it just installs from the marketplace and layers directly onto Business Central's existing journal and posting infrastructure. No custom dev required.
How does it actually do that without breaking the native system? Is it intercepting the data?
Think of it as an intelligent staging area. Instead of forcing human workers to enter data directly into the rigid native journal where it might lock or crash the app, creates a flexible buffer zone.
A buffer zone.
Yes. The workers interact with this forgiving, flexible layer. The app gathers all their fragmented counts, does all the heavy lifting of sorting and aggregating the data, and then safely feeds the final, perfect numbers into the native Business Central journal in a format the native system can easily digest. No disruption to the core ledger.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How does this actually change the physical reality on the warehouse floor? If I'm the person holding the clipboard or the scanner, what is different about my day?
It changes everything about how the work is distributed. The new architecture centers around two key concepts, the inventory count card and count sheets. An inventory count card typically maps to a broad physical location, though it can handle multi-location operations.
So the card is like the overarching project file for the day.
Yes. And within that card, the system allows you to configure specific count sheets. A count sheet is essentially a named batch of items assigned to a specific team.
Reading through the documentation, the filtering capability of these sheets is what really stood out to me. You aren't just printing a massive alphabetical list. You can filter a count sheet by shelf range, by posting group, by vendor, or literally any item field.
It's incredibly granular.
Right. If you have a warehouse with a climate-controlled zone for raw materials and a separate loading dock for finished goods, you define one sheet per zone. Every counting team gets a list that is hyper-relevant to their specific area.
It completely eliminates the scenario where two teams are accidentally counting the same items and locking each other out of the system. But there is another feature here that fundamentally changes the operational timeline, and that is the as-of-date field.
Okay, let me see if I'm following how this works, because it seems counterintuitive at first. If I generate my count sheets on a Monday, but I don't actually do the physical count until Friday, aren't I going to be counting items that might have already shipped out on Wednesday? How does that not completely corrupt the data?
That is the genius of the time-stamping mechanism. The as-of-date field effectively decouples the physical counting from the ledger data. When you set that date, the app takes a digital snapshot of the inventory ledger at that exact moment.
Snapshot, okay.
When you finally enter your physical counts days later, the system calculates the differences against that specific historical snapshot, not the live current day inventory.
So I can take a snapshot of the ledger on Friday night. Over the weekend, the warehouse can keep receiving goods and shipping orders. On Monday, my team does the physical count based on the Friday snapshot, and the system is smart enough to factor out all the weekend movement.
Exactly. The business doesn't have to freeze. You don't have to lock the doors and halt all shipping just to generate paperwork or do the math. Beyond that scheduling flexibility, the actual data entry becomes much more resilient. The app supports paper-based counting, scanner-based counting, and hybrid approaches simultaneously.
Meaning Team A can be out there with old-school clipboards, Team B can be using sophisticated barcode scanners, and they're both feeding data into this staging layer at the exact same time without the system crashing.
Yes. Multiple users can enter counts into different sheets concurrently, which the standard physical inventory journal absolutely cannot handle cleanly. And for the teams using scanners, the app integrates directly with Warehouse Insight and WMS Express.
We should clarify those terms. WMS Express is a free software tool that allows for simple barcode-driven counting on phones and basic scanners. But Warehouse Insight is much broader, right?
Correct. Warehouse Insight is a comprehensive, full-scale warehouse management system. It controls everything from directed putaways to complex shipping logistics. Advanced Inventory Count plays perfectly with both the free lightweight tool and the heavy-duty enterprise system.
The source material provides a specific anecdote from a customer demo that puts all of this into perspective. They took a business that historically required a 4-day, highly complex count, heavily reliant on serial numbers.
4 days of operational downtime is a massive financial hit.
It's brutal. But by implementing this specific architecture, pairing the scanners with the intelligent staging layer, they reduced the physical count to a single day, with only half a day needed for reconciliation.
Recovering 2.5 days of operational time is a staggering return on investment. But, finishing the physical count quickly is really only the first phase. If we connect this to the bigger picture, how do we actually reconcile the inevitable mess without crashing the entire system? Because gathering the data is one thing. Making the data match the financial ledger without causing an accounting crisis is usually where the real nightmares happen.
The dreaded reconciliation phase. The source outlines a feature called the Count Difference Analysis Report. I love the philosophy behind this tool because it prioritizes the chaos.
It represents a crucial shift in perspective for warehouse managers. Instead of sorting discrepancies alphabetically or by bin location, the report sorts them by absolute dollar value.
So instead of a worker spending 3 hours searching the floor for a missing $2 bolt, simply because it starts with the letter A, the system immediately flags the biggest financial exposures.
Exactly.
If you are missing a pallet of high-end electronics worth $10,000, that discrepancy is sitting at the very top of page 1.
It perfectly aligns the physical operational effort with the actual financial risk. But what happens when you inevitably have to send a team back out to recount that high-value pallet? That's where the generate recount sheets function is triggered. It automatically flags items that exceed a specific quantity or value threshold, and it builds a brand new recount sheet just for those specific problem items.
And there is a critical detail here from an auditing perspective. When it generates that recount sheet, it actively locks the original count lines in the system,
Right. The original flawed data cannot be quietly overwritten or deleted.
which means the audit trail remains perfectly intact. You can prove to an external auditor, here is the exact data the worker with the scanner submitted on Tuesday, and here's the verified secondary recount we performed on Wednesday. There is no mysterious erasing of data just to make the final numbers look clean to the board.
Total transparency is built into the workflow. But eventually, once that reconciliation is finally verified, you have to face what is essentially the final boss of inventory management, the posting phase.
Oh man, the terrifying prospect of hitting post on a 10,000-line journal. For anyone who hasn't lived this, it is anxiety-inducing. You hit the button, the little loading wheel starts spinning, and you are just praying. And then it inevitably stalls out at line 8,241 because of one missing serial number or a blocked item code.
And a failure mid-post is devastating. If it crashes at line 8,000, the first 7,999 lines might have already posted to the ledger. You can't just hit a retry button.
Right.
You have to dive into the SQL tables to figure out exactly what posted and what didn't, which often requires calling in IT support and performing manual ledger reversals. It can take days to untangle, but the app builds a comprehensive safety net for this exact scenario. It utilizes a function called copy count to journals.
This is where that staging area concept really shines, right? Because it handles all the heavy lifting before it touches the fragile native journal.
Exactly. It automatically handles the transfer of item tracking lines, complex lots, and serial number reclassifications, and perhaps most importantly, dimension values.
Wait, before we move on, what exactly are dimensions in this context?
Dimensions in Business Central are essentially financial tags attached to entries. They allow you to slice and dice your financial reports later by department, by project, by region. If those tags get accidentally stripped out or misaligned during a massive inventory count, your accounting department is essentially flying blind for the rest of the quarter. The app preserves all of that metadata automatically.
So no manual mapping required.
None. But the true lifesaver is the pre-posting test report. Before you are ever allowed to hit that final post button, the system essentially runs a simulation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it checks every single journal line for blocked items, missing tracking data, incomplete posting groups, and any other condition that would cause a mid-batch failure. It catches the errors in the staging area before they can crash the actual posting process.
It acts as an automated quality assurance check. Looking at this holistically, it's very clear why this is such a strong value proposition, not just for the warehouse managers, but for Microsoft partners. If you are a consultant advising a client with heavy inventory needs, this native counting limitation is a wall they are guaranteed to hit.
Absolutely guaranteed.
You can step in and offer a clean deployment that doesn't require tearing out their core system, works with their existing barcode scanners, and is demonstrably faster than the native tools they are struggling with.
It becomes a very straightforward conversation with a client who just spent an entire weekend counting inventory and is currently pulling their hair out on a Tuesday trying to untangle a crashed journal.
So what does this all mean? When we piece this all together, it becomes clear that optimizing a modern supply chain isn't just about handing your workers faster barcode scanners or telling them to walk the aisles quicker. It is fundamentally about fixing the underlying data structures. It's about creating a flexible software architecture where multiple teams can work independently using different methods without crashing into each other's manual math. It's about intercepting data and removing friction so the physical reality of the warehouse can actually be recorded accurately without breaking the financial ledger.
Ultimately, it is about shifting the burden of complexity away from the human worker and placing it onto the software, which is exactly where it belongs.
For anyone listening who wants to dig into the technical specifications, review the full product details, or, try it out themselves, all the documentation and trials are available over at inventory4dynamics.com. The source material also strongly encourages reaching out to a certified Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central partner. They can run a custom demo against your actual warehouse configuration so you can see precisely where your specific operational bottlenecks could be eliminated.
This raises an important question to leave you with, though. We spent a lot of time discussing that as-of-date feature and how it effectively decouples the time of the physical counting from the time the system data is actually recorded.
The digital snapshot concept.
Yes. If software can now successfully separate those two concepts, if we no longer have to completely freeze the business just to count the business, it forces us to wonder about the long-term trajectory of supply chain management. As these software integrations get even tighter, and as warehouse systems get even smarter, will the traditional, highly disruptive count day eventually disappear entirely? Will we see it replaced by an invisible, continuous background pulse of data, where the system is just seamlessly reconciling itself piece by piece, day by day?
That is a wild, fascinating thought to ponder. A totally uninterrupted supply chain. No more shutting down receiving, no more panicking accountants, and most importantly, no more locking those heavy warehouse doors. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.